It's time to explore the great indoors.
Pirates ahead, all hands on deck and ready the cannons.
Where imagination has no boundaries.
And then the princess rode the dragon.
And fun is limitless.
Captain, we're ready for liftoff.
Explore the great indoors with Eagle Communications, with TV and internet starting at $84.99 for 2 years.
Eagle Community Television presents Community Connection with your host, Mike Cooper.
Welcome to our Community Connection from Eagle Community Television. We appreciate you joining us. And thanks as always to the editor and producer of our series behind the camera, Brandon Cooley from Eagle Community Television. We're in our studios with the Director of Music in Victoria Schools, USD 432, Luke Johnson, who is responsible for the K2 through 12 music program in the Victoria Schools. And one of the reasons we wanted to visit with Luke was about music programs in Victoria. Let's start there if we could, Luke.
Sure.
Tell us about the scope, would you?
Yeah, absolutely. I spend most of my day at the grade school. I do kindergarten through 6th grade, and we're very fortunate. I get to see every class every day. So that's most of my day. I start the day at the high school. I do junior high school band. It's a combined class. So we have 7th grade through 12th grade in that class. And then a new class we're doing this year is a history of rock and roll class, and that's just for high schoolers, and that's the last hour of my day.
That should be interesting.
It's been a lot of fun. Yeah, we have 20 kids enrolled, which is a big number for high school.
That's amazing. What's your teaching approach, Luke? How do you engage and interest students? Because you're working with the very young ones who are just coming into music education and the veterans in high school.
It starts with relationships. I think no matter the age, the kids have to like you. So spend a lot of time building relationships, eating lunch with the kids, helping them in the classroom if I have a break, just seeing what they're doing, going to sporting events. So I try to really be involved in their lives. Once they see I care, then they want to care about the things I'm into, which is music. So.
And there's a certain enthusiasm, I think, Luke, that you bring to the classroom.
Absolutely, yeah. I love kids and I love music, so when you combine those things together, it's easy to be enthusiastic.
I told Brandon earlier that he and I probably are going to be in rare company with a Grammy nominee, and probably the only Grammy nominee we'll ever know, but
Right.
We're certainly happy to have this with the Grammy nomination. Tell us how it came about for a music educator.
Yeah, there's a nomination process, and it's through their website. I'm guessing, I think this is the 3rd or 4th year. It's somewhat of a new award. But anybody can nominate any music teacher they'd like by going to that website. And then I got an email asking me to fill out an application, and it had some basic kind of demographic or questions, and then some questions about my philosophy of education, how I teach, my approach, and you fill all that out, and I don't know, 2 months later, they notified me I was selected as a quarterfinalist.
Well, isn't it about time the Grammys recognize music educators where the basis of all of this creativity begins, Luke?
Absolutely. And I think elementary music education is where all that starts. So it's a great thing they're doing that.
So basically it's a submission of an application. You don't have to present any work or anything like that necessarily?
Not initially. So the initial application, I think there were 4,000 or 5,000 people that sent in applications.
Wow.
And then when they cut it down to just under 200, which is when they named quarterfinalists, at that point there was some work to submit.
What's the value of parental support for students, Luke?
It's huge. I only see them for a short amount of time every day. You know, with my little kids, it's 30 minutes in the elementary school and 50 minutes a day for the junior high school kids. So the majority of their learning needs to happen at home with this. And having parental support, just encouraging them to try, you know, is a really big deal. And then having parents at concerts, you know, kids always want to know their parents are proud of them. So having them support them at concerts. And we do a lot, you know, with all our football games and basketball games, but our parents are fantastic. They're always at every game, and it keeps the kids just excited and encouraged.
That's the beauty of a community like Victoria, where there is strong parental support, regardless of whether it's sports or music or plays or whatever the case may be.
Absolutely, and it's really fun for me to also be supportive, because my kids do everything at junior high school. You know, I'm at a junior high ball game where my trombone player's a point guard on the basketball team, you know, those sorts of things. So, yeah, community support is huge, and there's tons of it in Victoria.
Give us a message to students as well as parents, Luke, on finding the right fit in music with the opportunities that might be opening up for young people, whether it be instrumental or choral. How do parents, give some guidelines to parents, how do they help their children make that determination of what fits best with them?
Sure. The first thing is just what's fun. What does the kid want to do? Not everything about music is fun, but that's our goal. You know, music's supposed to be fun. It's hard work too. But if it's finding an instrument, have your child or your student try every instrument. Play them all. That's something we do in Victoria. See what they like. Now, not everybody can be a percussionist. Not everybody can be a saxophone player. Those are usually the most common picked instruments. But just helping the student find things that are fun.
Choral versus instrumental, again, does it determine the direction of the student, how they kind of want to go on that?
It does. It's a whole different process, singing versus playing an instrument. I think everybody should do both, of course. But in scheduling, I mean, that's part of it in high school too. How does that fit in their schedule? In some places you have to pick one or the other, and others you can do both.
What were your influences, Luke?
Yeah, my father was a preacher, and so music was all the time in church. And then I started grade school. I was doing grade school musicals and singing and on stage, and that really was just fun for me. So I learned to love music at a really young age. And then middle school, high school, I played trombone. Fort Hays played trombone, guitar. So it's just something I've always done. And then, so I've had a lot of great teachers, a lot of great influences. Parents were very supportive throughout.
Well, I got to tell you that we've had a lot of enjoyable evenings listening to Luke Johnson at Fort Hays State and those music programs with the jazz band and all of the others that you have been involved in. It really brings something to the audience as well as to the players, doesn't it, Luke?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. You know, of course, the audience has their own experience of listening to a group. But for the musicians, it's an interesting experience, and I don't know if it's something I've had doing other activities, but not only for what it does personally, on a personal level, but also playing with your friends and having that special connection that you can't get any other way. So it's enjoyable.
Kind of like you and Brad Dawson still doing those venues around town.
Absolutely. Once a month we're at Gutch's, which has just been a lot of fun. We just play nice background dinner music, but we do a variety of things. He's a very good friend, and he has been for a very long time.
And quite an influence too, I'm sure.
Huge influence, absolutely.
The programs in music are so important to students. What do you see as the value of music education to students, Luke?
There's countless. We could talk for an hour on that, but from the academic side, there's a tremendous amount of research that shows how learning to play an instrument or learning to sing and engaging in those things works a variety of parts of our brain that no other activity does. And it helps students process information quicker. It makes them better problem solvers because they use both sides of the brain. But from a just enjoyment standpoint, there are kids that probably wouldn't be really excited to come to school every day if they didn't have an activity like music or art or shop or sports that they enjoy doing. So it really gives kids something they can enjoy as part of their school day as well.
And unlike some other areas, music's something they can carry with them through their life, can't they, Luke?
Oh, absolutely. I don't have my community band going this year, but my first year in Victoria, I had a 90-year-old trombone player playing with my 7th grade students. And so it was great for them to see that it's a lifelong joy and it's something you can always pick up and do.
We appreciate your enthusiasm in the classrooms, Luke. We really do. Plus, all of the great music that you and Brad and the other players bring to us on a regular basis.
Well, thank you very much.
The Director of Music at Victoria Schools, USD 432, Luke Johnson, our Community Connection.
Hi, I'm Brandon Cooley, and I am the Video Production Director at Eagle Marketing Solutions. We're a full-service production house. Service to me really is everything. I think it's very important that we show our clients that we really have their best interest in mind. Video is very engaging. It's really the best platform to tell your story. We pride ourselves on attention to detail, creative concepts, and fast turnaround. We're always working to find new ways to make our product better and to be able to just do what we can to help the client tell their story in the best way possible.
Eagle Communications is your complete business solution with options to fit any budget. We provide business class phone with customizable features and fast, reliable internet. Your knowledgeable team at Technology Solutions has a broad base of IT services to meet your needs. Let the experts at Marketing Solutions get your message to the right people on the best platforms. Eagle Communications will build your personalized business plan. Call us at 877-61-EAGLE.
Welcome again to Community Connection from Eagle Community Television. Thanks for joining us, and thanks as always to the producer and editor of our series, behind the camera, Brandon Cooley. We're in the studios today with the 111th District Representative Eber Phelps as we look at the new legislative session for 2018 from the Kansas Legislature. You enthusiastic about the start of the new session?
Oh, absolutely. You know, we look back at the last session, and I always mention to people that it was a really good session, in my opinion, and I also feel that it could have been an incredible session. There was a few things we needed to do yet, but for the most part, in a very long time, I guess in the last few years, we actually had a debate on the budget. We actually passed a balanced budget, and I think that, you know, a lot of us feel that there's a lot of work yet to be done. And so last year was something that was very productive, and hopefully we're going to go back and kind of pick up with all the cooperative effort we had and so forth, and bipartisanship, and have another good session.
Starts January 8th. You've got a session before that, January 7th, length of 190 days for the legislature.
I actually had a pre-session retreat last week, I believe it was. At least the Democrat caucus, we had a pre-session retreat, got updates on education and so forth, and then what we'll do here when we get to January 7th, we'll have an all-day meeting and get ready for the next day, which is the start of the session.
What committee assignments are you on this next year?
Well, I'll be on the same ones I was on last year, which consists of the Appropriations Committee. I'm also on the Higher Education Committee, which obviously is very important, you know, with having a Regents institution here. I'm also on the Local Government Committee, and then I was recently in Topeka just for a once-a-year meeting on the Healthcare Stabilization Fund oversight. And they provide the upper tier coverage for the malpractice insurance for physicians here in the state of Kansas.
Well, Eber, you said that there's more work to be done. What areas do you think that are still need to be focused on from last session that need further work?
Well, we obviously look at what's been going on, you know, with the Supreme Court decision. So I kind of mentioned to a number of, you know, groups recently that in years past, when you'd say, what's the big issues in the session, you might say the budget, the budget, the budget, top three issues. Well, this time it's education, education, education. So there's been kind of a, I guess you could call it a special committee. The House, you know, set up a special committee on the whole school finance formula, you know, making sure everything is constitutional. I don't believe they are, in my opinion, kind of on the track they need to be. The Senate hasn't done anything yet. So we have to respond to the court decision regarding our funding for K-12 education. And so the select committee that we have doing that on behalf of the House seem to be more focused on going after the Supreme Court due to their decision, instead of saying, well, how do we pay for this? And I'm sure we'll get to that, you know, the funding here in a minute. And I think I can probably illustrate that, or at least frame that in a little bit more positive light than I think a lot of people are looking at it. But the fact of the matter is, we have to deal with the school finance issue, and the court has given us till April 30th to do that. And so that's going to be one of the first things that's got to be addressed. Obviously, they're meeting you know, earlier this week, I know they were, or I should say they've been meeting this week. And also, we can't overlook the efforts we made last session on Medicaid expansion. We had 81 votes supporting that in the House. In other words, expanding Medicaid coverage here in the state of Kansas. As many people know, we've lost out on a lot of drawdown money from the federal government. If you look on the Kansas Hospital Association website, there's a ticker And right now it's probably at 2.4, I believe, or $2.3 billion.
Wow,
That billion dollars that we've passed up as far as drawing down. Now, where is that money now? It's going to help the 30 other states that do have Medicaid expansion. Most recent elections, I believe the state of Maine passed it overwhelmingly. We came close in the House, but we did not have enough for an override. Dan Johnson, the late Dan Johnson, I used to always say, when you needed anything done in the state legislature, you had to have 63 votes in the House and 21 in the Senate. Now you have to have 27 in the Senate and 84 in the House. So we were 3 votes short of having, veto-proof, vote on that Medicaid expansion. We can't keep passing up that kind of money. We're not in a position to, really refuse the federal drawdown money. I was in a forum the other night with several other legislators, and they seem to feel that they're very passionate about pursuing that again.
Well, and the bottom line is it will be helping Kansans who otherwise might not get adequate health care.
Well, yes, I had not looked at the Medicaid expansion from an economic development standpoint, but that's been brought up. But the fact of the matter is the main thing there is actual medical health coverage for a lot of people in need. But you look at where we're at budget-wise. We went into the last session, $900 million in the hole. Just think if we'd implemented the Medicaid expansion way back when, we wouldn't even have these discussions right now about funding education and seeing our infrastructure suffer because of the fund sweeps out of the Comprehensive Transportation Plan.
Well, that's another point, that this was a cash cow for Brownback for so many years to try to balance that budget.
Absolutely.
Are we going to be able to restore our highway funding?
I've been on 2 transportation bus tours here as of late. I went to Dodge City area, and then last week we were in around Saline and McPherson. So we're seeing, how they rate roads and when they need repair. We are doing a great job here in the city of Hays, scheduling our street repairs, prioritizing, and so forth. Well, our Department of Transportation has a methodology of going around and rating these roads and looking at the surfaces. And so we looked at some completed projects, some bridge decking, but we also saw some deterioration, and that only gets worse. I always said, your infrastructure as far as taking care of your roads is sort of the old Fram, I think it was, auto parts thing, pay me now or pay me later. And that's where I think we are with our roads, and we've done a pretty good job. The state of Kansas, I think we're number 4 as far as the most highways, miles of highway in the country, and so that's a pretty tall order to take care of that. But they're also important. That's kind of the lifeline for Southwest Kansas with the industry they have there. Not to mention, just all over the state. Well,
and you and I have talked before about the jobs that literally repairing and creating these roads and bridges and structures can bring to the economy of the state.
Right. There's, we keep looking at the job creation in our state, and to me, the money was already appropriated. I was in the legislature before when we approved the Comprehensive Transportation Plan, and so you had all this federal infusion of dollars, which would allow us to, hire people to do those jobs. And then, whenever there's a project, an enhancement project, or even, a preservation project near a community, there is an infusion of dollars into that community, whether it be for hotels and restaurants, but your parts dealers and so forth, fuel, and it really is a kind of a boon. Somebody might say, well, it's just short-lived, and I go, well, it's better than not having it. And some of those contractors even literally left the state to go to other opportunities that other states were offering for construction work. Yeah, I don't have documentation, but enough people have talked about it. It seems to me that it's got to be fairly factual that we've had some, road contractors have actually kind of gone where the money is, if you will, or where they've got a legislature that's willing to proceed. So I have definitely heard of some of them going to Nebraska and some of the surrounding states because that's where the work is.
Give us an idea of the legislative tone and temperament, how it's changed over this last cycle, Eber.
Well, I went, when I was in the legislature up until 2012, I saw the last couple years where it just seemed to be some people came into the legislature that maybe had, hidden agendas, if you will. And the communication seemed to kind of break down, and the atmosphere seemed to get a little bit more, disagreeable. And then the 4 years that I was not in the legislature, just reading the news accounts, it seemed to me that there's just a total breakdown in communication and so forth between the Senate and the House, and between the two parties, between the governor's office and the legislature. Obviously, continuous attack on the Supreme Court. Well, when I came back to Topeka last January, it was just readily noticeable that there was a friendlier, atmosphere. And as it turned out, it seemed to be a very collaborative, very cooperative spirit within the Capitol. Staff, mentioned it. I think morale was up, in the whole, arena there. And, and I heard people talk about the previous 4 years. And so, the Speaker of the House seemed to reach out to try to get that cooperative effort going. And when we looked at some of the votes, very early in the session, we had a vote on a tax bill, and there was, I think, 82 votes, I thought. I believe, if I recall, about 82 votes. So that, to me, was a signal that there was definitely a cooperative, bipartisan effort. And as we went through the session and saw the, the vote totals on some pretty, tough issues, it seemed to me that that cooperative spirit went all the way to the end. And we'll probably talk about that here in a second, but I hope that remains. And as I've gone to different forums, and with a lot of the Western Kansas legislators, there seems to be an enthusiasm to get back there, because they too, I believe, are first to admit that we had a very successful session and made tough decisions, and they're ready to do it again.
What areas specifically are you interested in pursuing for the new legislative session, Eber?
I believe that the healthcare issue, as we mentioned before, is very important, not only for the coverage, but just for the, the amount of money we're going to, be able to draw down. We have to get the education thing back on track, and just the overall budget, which we managed to do last session. And also, because of our actions last session, on the governor's tax plan that was implemented in 2012, because of the action we took on that, we've seen increased revenues for several months in a row. And so we still have the reporting period here, for December, January, February, and March. And I think we're going to be really surprised, because we've been above the estimates each month. And subsequently, we will probably be looking at a little bit better revenue picture as we get down the road with the session. So I want to stay focused on those things I just mentioned. But in the meantime, there's been some things that have, seen such drastic cuts. Even the beginning of the last session, the governor admitted that there was no place else to cut. You can't cut a lot of these programs anymore. And so we have seen some pretty critical situations with, mental health, with our community mental health centers seeing cuts. And, we've got all kinds of issues in corrections, short-staffed, undertrained, things like that.
Children's services.
And the home and community-based services are in need. You talk to the folks out here at Developmental Services Northwest Kansas, with their cuts, they're in need of being able to, hire people and pay them a, competitive wage. They tell me many stories about folks that, work there while they're going to the Fort Hays State University, get their degree in sociology or psychology, love working there, would love to remain, but just can't afford to on the pay that they're getting. So we have a Regents institution here in the city of Hays, obviously, and the Regents institutions have had cuts. I think 2016, the budget at Fort Hays State was $155 million. 2017, they were operating at $135 million. So that's a pretty significant cut. Fortunately, with their enrollment growth, they've managed to still maintain the quality, deliverance of an education that they have in the past.
With the legislature being a more cooperative organization and group now that you highlighted, will a change in the governor possibly allow us to expand the Medicaid in the state, you think?
Well, since we weren't able to get the override votes in the House, I think we voted on it first. I don't think the Senate, if I recall, didn't vote on it. The governor was adamant that if it passed, he was going to, that if the House and Senate would pass it, he was going to veto that. The lieutenant governor, who I'm not sure when this is going to happen, the talk right now is who's going to deliver the State of the State address. Is it going to be Lieutenant Governor Collier as governor, or is it going to be Governor Brownback still here in Topeka? But I'm not sure where Lieutenant Governor is going to be on this, because he was one of the main, I guess you could say, authors of the CanCare system that we have now, which I met with a number of hospital administrators the other night right here in Hays, and they were, they went around the room and they all told about all the problems and the delays and the different hurdles they had to get over. So there wasn't a real supportive argument for CanCare, thus the need to maybe do the Medicaid expansion. Now, where Lieutenant Governor Collier would be on that, being as he's so entrenched with CanCare, remains to be seen. But I think as people were out in the off session here, perhaps they heard from those administrators. And it's very critical for our rural, our safety net clinics and our critical care centers to have that Medicaid expansion, because a very small facility will benefit with $100,000, $200,000, $300,000.
Care to address the barrage of mailings that some of us have been receiving from American for Prosperity and the Kansas Policy Institute, these Koch-funded groups that are against you and those like Don Heineman and such that have taken to task for providing adequate funding for state services? What are these people thinking? Do they not care about the future of Kansas?
Well, that's anybody's guess. The fact of the matter is, there was 88 of us voted to override the governor on his, what we consider a very ill-fated tax plan that was implemented in 2012.
So did most of the voters, by the way, we should mention, I think.
Well, we had 88 people vote to override the governor's veto of that bill, and the Speaker of the House, as a matter of fact, was one of those, and Don Heineman, Representative Heineman in Dighton, the majority leader, has been getting those postcards as well. What we've seen happen is, so all over the state, I've had about 7 of those land here in Hays. I talked to some legislators back in the eastern part of the state have had as high as 12 of those come into their district. Wow. So a great expense.
Millions of dollars, basically.
Put into that to do that. We feel that what's happened is some people had maybe 2 or 3 of those land in their district and they stopped. So some of us feel that that's a recruitment effort. So once they maybe get somebody to respond, said, yeah, I'm going to run against that guy that voted to restore funding for K-12 education or whatever, needed services, I'm going to run against him, so they'll save their money, I guess, by not filing that. We also feel that there's probably an effort to get everybody to get real panicky and go out and spend all their money. So, a lot of legislators out here in western Kansas have a few $1,000s in their bank account. The AFP and their funding source has millions. So you can send out a postcard saying this isn't true. We actually did something that needed to be done because we hadn't had a balanced budget. We had deficit shortfalls, cuts to programs all across the state. We had to take the action we did. Well, you send that postcard out, 5 more are going to come and say, no, you didn't.
So you can't fight that.
It's sad, but I think most of us in the legislature of that group of 88, which is obviously a very bipartisan group that is pushing things through, same way in the Senate, by a hair. They are saying, we don't want to see this happen anymore. We're listening to the people. I could tell that during the campaign that people were definitely aware that there was something awry in Topeka and that things need to be fixed. So yes, the postcards that come in our districts, but we've also had a number of people really show support and agree with what our last session accomplished.
Last half minute, your electronic newsletter coming out soon. Folks can get it. How do they get it? And
well, we keep compiling an email list. A lot of times when somebody emails, those people that are very gifted with electronics, know how to go in there and put those. So we also, there's people that live out of the district get those, and a couple of them have said, you don't need to send this to me, if it's costing anything, but it doesn't. So, people have contacted me that maybe got, the mail-out newsletter they had, and they will indicate that they'd like to be on the list, and so we try to include them. We try our best to make sure we get them on our mailing list.
this is the hard copy version, basically.
Right. We just put that out here a couple weeks ago, and I didn't know if you had gotten a copy or not.
I do now.
Due to the amount of money we were, going to spend on that, they kind of had to do a random.
Now, is this the right address to get your electronic newsletter? Phelps.eber at, is that it?
Yeah,
Gmail.
Phelps.eber@gmail.com.
Okay, got it. Okay. Well, thank you, sir. We appreciate your time. Also appreciate your ability and your service to those of us in Kansas. Good luck in the 2018 legislative session.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mike. Appreciate it. Good to be here.
Our 111th District Representative, Ebert Phelps, is our community connection.
For over 60 years, Eagle Communications has been the leader in value and service. And over that time, our specialized teams have been helping businesses grow because Eagle is your one-stop for business solutions. We can provide the latest in hosted phone, reliable fiber internet, IT support, business compliance, and network planning. Plus, we offer affordable advertising on television, radio, and digital platforms. Call our employee owners today and let us serve you. Eagle Communications, our community connected.